How many times have you thought about being at a party, drinking, having a good time, drinking whatever you want to drink, whether it's alcoholic or non-alcoholic, it doesn't really matter. But you're drinking out of a cup and you look down at that cup and it's a plastic cup. It could be like a red cup, could be a blue cup, could be a yellow cup. Sometimes you're playing beer pong or some sort of beer pong, whether it's alcoholic or non-alcoholic, doesn't matter. Right? You're playing all these games with it, but you realize that those cups are not really good for the environment. They're plastic, they're single use, and they'll probably get thrown out and you'll never see it again. And it probably it's probably not getting recycled like you would normally think it would get recycled. And it's probably just getting thrown out and going into a landfill. Not good for the environment, not good in the production process as it's oil and based and petroleum based. And so you just think about that. But all you're doing is really, you're at a party. So why do you have to be depressed and think about this? Wouldn't it be better if you had a cup that actually was compostable, like fully compostable, and you don't have to worry about that? Well, I'm telling you right now that there's a cup available, and it's not only better for you, but it's better for all. And we are here to talk to Reagan Kelly, who works for Better for All, and she's here to talk about the cups, that journey to making this cup that's fully compostable, and what it means for the environment and what it means for business in the future. We're going to talk about that on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Loon, and this is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about taking action, and that is how someone can create a business that is better for all. That's right, it's called Better for All. You can go to betterforall.co, C-O, or you can go to betterforall.shop to be able to take a look and buy these cups that are fully compostable. That's it. They are very good for the environment. You can drink out of them. You can play beer pong with them or some kind of beer pong with them. And you can just have them. You can see them at festivals. You can see them maybe in the future at concert venues or sporting events. They could be everywhere. And Reagan Kelly is here to talk about the journey to create this cup and why it's so important that we have them in existence and sort of in our supply chain, and how hard it was to create it, and the challenges that she had to face and the challenges that she overcame to be able to get this in production. And she talks about how it was in production of a recent music festival called the Tortuga Festival down in Florida, and how that went, and what people were looking for and who they partnered with and everything. It's a great interview. I can't wait for you to be able to hear this interview, because I think we need to see more businesses that are out there promoting more sustainable products. And it's just a great way of finding out how people are marketing these types of products. So here's the interview with Reagan Kelly from Better for All. Enjoy, and I will talk to you after. Hey Reagan, welcome to the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Are you ready to talk about compostable cups?
Yes, I am.
That is awesome. I have to admit, I never thought I would be so excited to talk about compostable cups. It's not something that, comes on like the top of your mind, but I'll have to tell you, seeing so many plastic cups that are just being thrown out after use, after a one-time use, or they're being cracked or things like that, drives me insane. So when I came across you and I came across your site, I was like, we have to talk about this. This is important. Someone said, hey, I'm going to stand up to the red K-cups and I'm going to say, you know what? Enough is enough. We're going to go and we're going to battle this, and we're going to provide a better solution, which I love. And I'm sure a lot of the audience members here are going to love it as well. So we're going to get into all that. But first, I want to get to know you a little bit, Reagan, and what led you into this journey of entrepreneurism. Can you just let us know who you are and what you do?
Yes, my name is Reagan Kelly. I am a product lead and messaging, I guess, in charge of messaging at Better for All, which is a California company. We're family owned and founded, run out of Pasadena, California, and all we do is cups.
All you do is cups. Now that's I know it seems like, a company coming out with just doing one product and you're like, okay, it's just cups. How do you, build a business just on cups? I feel like that's something that, a lot of people are like, why don't you have more kind of products? But with the battle with cups these days and seeing how many people use cups, it seems like a pretty viable business to just have, look, we supply cups. That's what, if you want cups, you come to us. That's what we do. How did it all start? How did this whole journey start?
Yeah, so in 2018, I think our family, along with pretty much everyone else in the United States, started to become keenly aware of how much plastic pollution we were dumping, in particular into the ocean. But I think for
Right.
some reason, part of it was that China stopped, accepting our plastic
Mm-hmm.
recyclables, right?
Yep. I remember
And we
that.
were suddenly facing these mountains of trash we were creating. I had always been really obsessed with the environment and recycling, and I was just really known for nerding out on that stuff. So I was kind of that was my torch, if you
Yeah.
like. And as a family, we were living all in the same city for the first time in decades, and we were looking for something to do together. We have young kids, and we were thinking about a restaurant play, went to a restaurant show, and saw our first plant-based compostable forks, actually.
Right.
And
Okay.
yeah, and I was like, oh, we should definitely incorporate these, because I was really like,
Yeah.
I kept thinking, with restaurants, you're going to get takeaway. With takeaway, you're going to get trash. And it was giving me a headache. And my stepfather was like, what if we made this the business? And
Hmm.
so we just set off to learn everything we could about the world of compostable materials and plant-based materials. I learned that plastics were made out of oil, and that kind of blew my mind. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, wow,
Yeah.
this whole problem we're looking at is one
Yeah.
industry. So, first we started with the familiar products and materials, PLA and bags. We took on apparel bags and all kinds of sort of things that normally get characterized as trash and packaging pretty
Right.
quickly. And
Right.
we were having a really hard time finding a foothold, and really finding a way for people to sink their teeth into the concept, and decided in 2020 to zero in on a product that people already felt connection to. And the cup really just jumped out at us as something that hadn't really been taken on in
Mm-hmm.
terms of sustainability, right? Yes, people were starting to use reusable bottles. Definitely, there were some really interesting cup options out there. Most of
Right.
them, unfortunately, made from petroleum plastic, but they were reusable. I was loving
Mm-hmm.
that. But none of the big, like, sort of takeout companies, et cetera, you know who you are, were doing anything to really like address the problem.
Yeah.
And so I'd been working with PLA. I had thought to myself, at the time, I thought to myself, if we go with PLA, we're facing an uphill battle because PLA is commercially compostable.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the only way you can safely break it down. And in the US, there's just not a lot of infrastructure in place yet. So I had been doing a lot of research into different materials, and I had discovered this material called PHA. At the time, the only anecdote I could find about it was about, this test where people had made beach toys out of
Mm-hmm.
PHA, and they had fully biodegraded in the sand.
Oh,
And
wow.
I thought, oh my God, that's so amazing, right? Because, of course, I was also doing a ton of reading about the five gyres and the
Yep.
ocean waste, and the ocean cleanup was just getting underway.
Yep.
This was just like this kind of collision of things happening. And so I started calling all the PHA producers in the world and having conversations with them. There were only about five. And we found one. It's a Japanese company called
Mm-hmm.
Konica, but its biopolymers division is headquartered in Houston. So
Oh,
that
okay.
seemed great. It was
Yeah.
also 2020, and we all know what happened in 2020. So I had been flying back and forth to China, and I couldn't
Mm.
anymore.
Right.
So decided to pivot development to the United States, and so Konica was really interested. They were very cool. They're huge, like a $5 billion Japanese company, but they were interested in partnering with a small family startup,
Yeah.
and like promoting our sort of like technical struggle with figuring out how to make a cup out of a brand new plant-based material.
So this was like starting from scratch. Like you
A
didn't
hundred
look like
percent.
another formula. It's like, help me make this formula so that when it's done in its usage, it will be fully compostable.
That's well. So they did have They had PHA. So PHA is a naturally occurring substance. It
Okay.
exists in the world around us, right? It's
Yeah.
when it was first discovered in like 1920. It was discovered by a soil scientist. It's a product of cellular metabolism.
Okay.
It's almost like body fat, but at a microscopic level. So it's
Gotcha.
nutrients that are sort of packaged for later. And these people are way more brilliant than I am, but they saw the potential in the chemical structure, the molecular structure of
Yeah.
PHB, PHA. So it limped along. Petroleum plastics were gaining a lot of traction. They were super easy to work with. And it just kind of like languished, I think, until the end of the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple of companies, seeing the plastic pollution problem growing and the problems with recycling really addressing it, they started to develop PLA in the United States and then PHA in a few other locations. And so PHA at this point is about 30 years old,
Okay.
but it is more expensive to
Mm-hmm.
develop than, or to make at this point, than petroleum byproducts.
Right.
So a big part of that is just, market adoption. You need to have
Mm-hmm.
like enough people buying this stuff to reduce prices and create efficiencies. But anyway, and then you also just needed like movement in the market. Like, we have to make a change, right? And
Right.
that like for the last 20 years, there's been a lot of debate about whether climate change is even happening. So
Yeah.
we had to get over that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. So anyway, so when I went to Konica, they did have a PHA. They call it PHBH. That's kind of
Okay.
its particular molecular structure. And it was, I could make a cup out of it. So I did make a cup. I was working with a small factory in Portland and managed to make a cup. It was too fragile. And so
Mm-hmm.
Konica went back to the drawing board and worked on the formula. And now we have a cup that is flexible, not too fragile,
Yeah.
and can completely and safely compost in your home composter or in commercial composter.
And so for a commercial composter, would that be something like, so here I live in Ontario, we put our stuff out for composting, like for the garbage people to pick it up, that they would take it to a commercial composter? Is that what it is? Just a
Yep.
larger size composter instead of like something in the home in your backyard?
Yeah, so typically the difference between commercial composting and home composting is the temperature,
Gotcha.
um, right? So when you're in a commercial compost setup, you have a very specific, so different soil microbes thrive in different temperatures and moisture levels. So commercial composters know exactly what microbial community they want to foster. They're going to
Right.
eat and break down everything really fast. So they constantly regulate and measure the temperature and the moisture level of the compost pile, right? They
Gotcha.
turn it at a certain rate. They also are responsible for putting it through a process at the end that will completely kill any kind of bacteria or something that could make the soil,
Yeah.
I guess, not great for farming and for
Mm-hmm.
gardening. At home, you just, I mean, I have a compost. I'm definitely not measuring and regulating everything.
Right.
So right. So you kind of put everything in and you turn it and, but you go away for this, for 2 weeks and you come back and it's dry
Yep.
and right.
Yep.
So you need a product that is delicious to a much broader array of microbes that thrive in different temperatures and different types of soil and different moisture levels. So that's why
Okay.
PHA is so awesome, because it is very friendly to a wide host of
Right.
microorganisms.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So now let's. I like how we're looking at sort of the composure and what it consists of, what this cup consists
Mm-hmm.
of. How long did it take you to develop it from right from the beginning all the way till you had the product in your hand?
Yeah, so I would say that we really just fully commercialized in the last 7 months,
Oh,
eight
wow.
months.
So it's
Yeah,
taken about almost 6 years to
it's taken really almost 4 years to get
almost
us
four
here.
years.
Yeah, the
Okay.
first 2 years we're making other things, and the good news is I know how to make other things. But so our like the sleeves, the cups come in are also certified home compostable, but
Okay.
the cups themselves, because you need them to be able to withstand all kinds of wear and tear,
Yeah.
travel,
Yeah.
sitting at a bar, getting
Mm-hmm.
thrown around, So we just
Yeah.
had our first kind of sizable use case at the Tortuga Festival in Florida in
That's
April.
awesome.
So, we had about 104, we delivered 170,000 cups. I think about 140,000 cups just were used on the beach for 3 days in the sun and
Wow.
carried up on stage. And, people had really cool little, festival goers are very clever, right?
Yeah.
So I saw all kinds of interesting belt devices where they almost like a tool belt where they had the cup slotted in
Okay.
and they did well, and then because
Yeah.
they're so different looking, they're the
Mm-hmm.
natural PHA color. They were easy for festival goers to know where to put them, so they put them in the compost bin. They had
Right.
really high diversion rates, and then they were hauled to the local composter.
That's amazing. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, we mentioned it right before recording, where you're going up battling against the single use, red cups that people have, or blue cups, the ones that people drink at a keg, or maybe even at a festival, probably in the past, or even
Yeah.
continues at different festivals. That's a challenge to get over because they almost have their own brand in themselves. Everybody knows
Yep.
that they're wasteful. Everybody knows that they're going to use them. They'll crack at some point. They'll throw them out in the garbage. Maybe they'll put them in the recycling. I don't even know if they're fully recyclable at this point. Probably not, as you shake your head. But they have their own brand. Like, people look for the red cups or the blue cups or whatever cups they
Yep.
come in. You got the beer pong game where it's like a big thing.
Yep.
And people look for that. How do you carve out a space in the market? Are you promoting that this is good for the environment? Is that the messaging around it? Or is it just, do you want a cup that's going to last? Like, is it just based on what it is? Because I know different companies who have built a sustainable product have gone different paths,
Right.
and it changes each for each company, and it's unique to each company. So I'm just curious, what was your messaging style with this
Yeah.
product?
So I think, we have a number of different markets that we're kind of reaching out to. I would say on the business to business side, you have businesses that are either being regulated, policies are requiring them to move away from single use plastic. They just care and they want to do something different. Or you have festivals that are really connected to the environments that the festivals are held in, and they know what the impact is, how much trash
Mm-hmm.
is generated in 3 short days. So
Right.
they're looking, they're really looking
Yeah.
for something better. So with them, it's a different conversation. It's really why our cup versus something else. I would say that, I have this dream of having a version of our cup that's a bit more substantial for reusable systems. I mean, reuse
Mm.
systems haven't quite really caught up yet. I don't, I think we're going to figure it out eventually, but right now you have reuse systems, but they're implementing pretty toxic petroleum plastic cups.
Mm.
So for me, and I really passionately believe this, we need to move away from petroleum plastic
Yep.
everywhere
Yep.
that has a single use or limited use application. Obviously,
Right.
there's a lot of places where we have plastics that last for decades the way they're supposed to. That's not what I'm talking about. When you have
Right.
something that's potentially going to have a use life of 10 minutes or even months, you don't want to use something that's got such a negative impact on the environment. It's also, a lot of these plastics have really pretty harmful
Mm-hmm.
chemicals that
Mm-hmm.
leach out of them. And then also when they break down, they create microplastics. And I know
Yep.
because you're so knowledgeable about the ocean, you know exactly what that's doing to
Yeah.
our waterways and our soil.
Well, and even
So
our health too, right? Like,
even our
we're
health,
seeing it now. It's in the air, and it's in our lungs, and it's in our blood, and we're seeing the effects of that over long
yeah,
terms. Yeah, I think we're just starting to scratch the surface in terms of the effects of microplastics on the human
I
body
a
as
million
well.
percent agree with you. Yeah, I
Yeah.
a million percent agree with you. So anyway, so I could see our material, our cup being a really beautiful component of a reuse system Now you have the cups being reused and recirculated in a closed loop environment like a festival.
Yeah.
On the direct to consumer side, we just launched Better for All shop, which is, we ship sleeves directly to consumers. And what I see there is, um, you know, early adopter, sort of smart shoppers going out and looking for new materials.
Mm-hmm.
And in those cases, typically, like if they're ordering for a party, it looks like.
Yeah.
There's some small businesses I can see that are ordering for, say, if they have, a physical therapy center or something like that, water cups. And
Yeah.
you can wash and reuse our cups.
Okay.
This material is high heat tolerant to the boiling point of water, which is a unique, so like PLA and a number of plastics would melt in the same temperature. So it's an interesting material, but the cup is relatively thin walled because we needed it to be as home compostable as possible. Like I wanted it to biodegrade in as short a period as possible. It
Yeah,
also
that's true.
keeps it also keeps the price point down. I mean, if you have tons of expensive material in a product, it's going to be expensive.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
that's true too. So it's really, so you have the sort of the business to business where you can do festivals, you can do conference centers, maybe you could do
yep,
universities and things like that, where you can have those cups or anywhere that they would use that. And that would be, like you said, like, you said this, we're looking at hundreds of thousands of cups being used at a festival. Obviously that
yep,
makes it good for revenue, but also for usage. And I can just imagine how much less plastic they have to deal with instead of using
yep,
just a plastic cup. Obviously better messaging for the festival. They can say, hey, isn't
yep.
it great that we have these cups? We don't have to worry about it. What was their reaction? That there's a Tortuga festival. What was their
Tortuga, yep.
reaction afterwards, or did they kind of promote the cups in any kind of way to just be like, "Hey, we're doing something different. We're trying our best to not, put out pollution"? Because I have to admit, I'm thinking of there was a documentary a while ago about it was a festival. Oh God, I can't remember. I can't believe I can't remember.
Glastonbury
No,
or
Woodstock too. The second
oh,
Woodstock in the
Woodstock. Yeah,
90s, and how much plastic and garbage was left. Like, I mean, that one,
yeah,
Reagan, like that was disgusting. And it even got to the
yeah,
point where it was like unsanitary, how much stuff was around.
yeah.
But like festivals must love this, because they, a lot of the people who go to festivals are a little bit more like earthy. Like
Mm-hmm.
the you get the quote unquote
It's
hippies of
true.
the world who go there. They want to be good for the environment. They're kind of camping out anyway at a lot of the places. And so
Yep.
you want to kind of say, hey, this is good. You're not going to be impacting the environment with that. What was the festival's reaction like throughout the festival about the cups?
So yeah, I would say I'll answer that question in three parts. One, it was the festival producers, which so Live Nation is the sort of umbrella producer, but Rock the
Gotcha.
Ocean is the nonprofit producer of Tortuga, and they're all of the funds that they raise go to ocean conservation issues. So they were looking for our cup because of the marine degradability of PHAs,
Yes. Yes.
right? And so they were searching, they were already using compostables, but they were really worried about the materials ending up in the ocean because
Of
it's
course.
right on the beach, right?
Yeah.
So they tracked us down through my website and then emailed me, asked me some questions. I sent them some samples and they took them directly to their composter and said, yes or no.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
composter, Renewable is their name. They're also in Fort Lauderdale. They said, please, please take these cups. What was interesting is the reason they wanted the cups was because they were so different looking than PLA or plastic cups. So part of the issue with PLA is they look so much like plastic
Mm,
that it's really hard for composters to sort them out, right? So they don't
gotcha.
know, is this contamination? Is it
Oh,
compostable?
I see what you mean.
Right.
Yeah.
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 Sorting
Yeah.
is a
Okay.
huge part of waste management. Like
It is.
I've learned so much about waste management. So, yeah. So they said, please take these cups from a sorting perspective, and they looked at our certifications and were like, okay, these will be fine. And then, yeah, during the festival, they had I guess, a booth on the conservation pavilion. And people came, attendees came through and they chatted to them about the cups. And we got some really nice what I can see, and I know this would be true for me if I was at a festival, is you come to a festival to enjoy, to just completely disconnect from your daily life and
Yeah.
immerse yourself in music. You're
Yep.
with other people who love the same thing you do. And there's so much potential, I think, for concert promoters to just add to the joy, right?
Mm-hmm.
By helping people. I mean, I don't think anyone who went to Woodstock wanted to like wade through piles of their own trash, right?
No,
Like
not at all.
that was not on the freaking like bill,
Right.
right? On the
Yeah,
playbill.
exactly.
So I think, there's a huge, like, right. So just recently, I think like a week and a half ago, Live Nation, Warner Brothers Music, and then a whole bunch of different artists with MIT Environmental Initiative, I think it's called, just announced that they're bringing together a bunch of people in across all levels of the music industry and a live event industry to figure out the best way to lower climate emissions in relation to live
Mm,
events, but also like how do we find the best materials? How do we do better? How do we like preserve the planet and the people on it? So I think there's some good movement happening in that sector
yeah.
for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And especially like getting in with, companies like, that put on festivals, that put on music, conference centers and stuff like that. You feel like it's a win-win situation, right? You just have
Yeah.
to package it properly and make sure that it works. Like the cup works. It
Yes.
does its
Yeah, it
function
has
of
to
what a
work.
cup
Yeah, it has to
has. It has to
work.
work. It has to work.
Yeah.
Now here's a question. We're seeing a lot of, now I'm not sure where the US is on this. I've seen it in certain places, but like Canada, where I live, the government is trying to crack down on single-use plastic. And there are, like right now, there are 6 plastics that are banned from being used, and they're slowly phasing those out. It's being held up in court with a decision right now. That's a different episode
Interesting.
to deal with, because all the plastic companies and the fossil fuel companies are trying to fight it. But there are 6 single-use plastics that you cannot use, and a lot of it has to do with like plastic cutlery, and takeout items and things like that. With that said, restaurants are moving towards like the better takeout containers. You're already starting to see it. You're starting to see better like the single use cutlery is becoming more sustainable. Do you see an option for moving into or outside of the US where companies are having that foresight, or the governments are trying to kind of not push, but just, nudge the alternative sources that are more sustainable?
Yes, for sure. I mean, definitely North America is not really an issue for us. I would
Right.
say, we get a lot of interest from Europe and some of the island nations, and even as far as India. But not right now. Like that's just,
Right.
I don't think it makes any sense. You'd have to be manufacturing close to the point of consumption just to make sense from an emissions perspective, I believe.
Right.
But yeah, North America for sure. And
Yeah.
I'm so curious to see what happens in Canada. I mean, we're so far from anything
Mm-hmm.
like that. I mean, businesses have to struggle with whatever policies are in place in their state, in their municipality, right, in their city, and just figure it out piecemeal, from what I can tell.
Yeah.
We in California, of course, we have a little bit more progressive
Yep.
legislation, some would say, but it's still all over the place. Like it's whoever was active and engaged with the process of writing the policy at the time and whatever their beliefs were. I have my, I don't know. There's probably some really interesting work being done on like what will the impact would the impact be if we took all single-use plastics and turned it into paper. I
Mm.
mean, that would, I don't know how many trees that would be. I mean,
Yeah.
just look at like the impact of toilet paper on
Mm-hmm.
forests, right? So I don't know. Like, I think there needs to be a centralized conversation about like what the viable alternative materials are.
Yeah.
And like, so for example, there's a lot of interest in seaweed plastics. I'm
Yes.
sure you, right?
Yes. Kelp,
I'm
seaweed.
interested in them.
Yeah,
I think it's fantastic, right?
for
But I
sure.
would say that I know for sure that at least one of the seaweed companies that are making products right now and at a very small scale um, are using PHA as a blend because
Right.
you know, it's not easy to just take a a piece of seaweed and turn it into a
For sure.
viable and commercial product. So
Yeah.
I think that PHA has a long way to go in terms of promoting itself as
Hmm.
a viable alternative. And yeah, you're absolutely right. The plastics lobbyists are well funded, and it's just going to be an ongoing battle. But I just, I think we're going to pull it off.
Absolutely. 100%. 100%. It's
We have
inevitable.
to.
It's inevitable. Exactly. Well, and I think a lot of the things too, one of the message that could come out of this, of using, and even for festivals or businesses, is the amount of sort of their footprint, the reduction of their footprint by using non-plastic items. I think
Yeah,
I saw a stat recently, and 20 to 30% of fossil fuel, like petroleum and oil, and goes into creating plastics. So if we're
yeah,
trying to reduce the sort of the dependency on fossil fuels, we have to reduce our dependency on plastics. Now, like you said, we
absolutely.
have a long way to go, because it seems
Yeah,
like every one of our plastics, bottles, containers, things like that, if they're single use, they're pretty much plastic. We've moved away
yep,
from glass a long time ago. Now we're into plastics. It's cheaper to make. It's great for the companies. They don't want to really move away from it. And it's going to need a lot of government regulation. However, I feel like the companies who are progressive and who have the same values of, look, if we're going to use these things, and there's an alternative that's affordable, that's available, that we can use on mass scale if we're conference centers or music festivals, or concert halls, and things like that. We can start to move the needle, and companies can come out and just like, hey, just look, like, not only did we reduce the amount of trash, but we reduced our footprint by however many
yeah,
tons of carbon dioxide, or
right.
greenhouse gas emissions. And I think that is a huge thing. And
Yep,
and to be honest, like, most people, when they go to these venues, they may not care. Who knows? They may not care,
yep,
but as long as it works, that's fine. And then the companies can promote their sustainability and just be like, we're doing our best. We're trying to
yep,
figure this out. And if we know it works, and it builds on like referrals and things like that, and the messaging that you guys provide, then it's perfect. So
yep.
I think it's great. Now, you've done a lot of work on building these cups, right? Like this product. I think I was just like checking on your website. I think you have like an 8 ounce and a 6 ounce cup. Is that like for
We have
like
an eight
for
ounce.
customer, like business to customers? Is that it?
Yeah, so we have an 8 ounce and we have a 16 ounce.
Okay.
And we have a 20,
Oh yeah.
22 ounce pilot. So
Okay.
that one's not on the website yet, but I send it off as a sample just to gauge interest. It was initially specifically for stadiums because that's a pretty large pour, but
Yeah.
right. But yeah, so the
Yeah.
16 is kind of your 16, 18 was brim full. That's your classic red party cup size.
Yep.
And then 8 ounce, it's a 7, 9 ounce. It's like perfect for wine, water,
Right.
etc. We actually have a lot of, I would say, direct to consumer. There's more interest in the 8 ounce than in the 16, which is interesting.
Gotcha. Yeah,
It
that's
could just
interesting.
be kind of who's finding out about it and
Yeah,
purchasing at this point, right?
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so back to your, I was just thinking about, you had asked a marketing question earlier, and I would say an interesting thing that's emerging is I feel like, and this may just be, I work with this wonderful group of content creators in Florida, and one of them's always saying, everything's connected, right? And it's like, just remember, everything's connected, and I think that's
Hmm.
something that it might be just dawning on a lot of people.
For sure.
When you think
Yeah.
about I think I was thinking about your podcast, and I also follow you on LinkedIn. And I remember when Google Earth first came out,
Yeah.
and when you would zoom in on parts of the world that were just ocean, they were
Hmm.
just painted blue pixels. They didn't even
Yes.
bother like showing you the actual ocean in that. And I thought, yeah, I think we didn't think of the ocean or conceive of it as
It's
a
true.
habitat, like a
It's true.
place that all of these things were living, right?
Yep.
It's
Well,
kind of fascinating.
and funny story about that is, it didn't happen until Dr. Sylvia Earle started to work with Google Earth, because they
Oh,
presented
wow.
it in front of her, and they said, "What do you think? You like this Google Earth?" And you're right, it was just Earth, like it was just land on the planet, and the rest was blue. Like there was
Blue.
no 3D imaging. There was no diving into the ocean like you can do now. And she said, and they asked her, what do you think? And she said, look, this is wonderful. Like, this is great. Like, the mapping is going to change mapping. It's going to change navigation, all this kind of stuff. But she's like, but what about, why call it Google Earth? And it's like, what do you mean? It's like, it should be called Google Ocean because our planet is a planet of oceans, over 70%. And they were like, oh, and she's like, why don't you start putting the features of the ocean in the ocean? Like, where you have all this percent, like 70% of that
right.
globe is nothing right now. And that's
Right.
how Google in a way, that's how Google Ocean was formed. And now we start to see, like, now I don't even know what the education around is and how many people know, but you can dive underneath the surface. You can
That's
look at
amazing.
monuments and things like that, and marine protected areas and all this one of canyons and seamounts and things like that. So, that's how it progresses. It's people letting people know. So I can just imagine too, going back to these cups is, you're at a festival and you're like, wow, this is great. Like, you're probably looking at it. It's different than your normal cups you get probably at festivals. You're starting to, I'm sure the conversation happened with, hundreds of thousands of people that were at this conference and or at this festival. And people are talking about, like, I wonder what the benefit is. And then if they got to know what the benefit is, then they're like, well, this is great. Like, this is really nice to see this kind of stuff. It makes you feel better about yourself that, there are companies out there who are trying to do good, and it doesn't affect whether you're having a good time or you're not having a good time. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that, you're still getting your water, your juice, whatever else you decide to consume at a at a festival, right?
Yep.
But it's the awareness of it. And I think that's the big thing. It's why I started this podcast in the first place, was to make people aware of what's happening in the ocean. And part of that is to, like, how do we, it's tough to find sustainable items. There aren't many resources. We're starting to see more and more resources of people coming out, with, like, just sort of a resource of where you can find certain things. But this one is great because it really battles the plastic alternative of what we're used to. And I'm looking forward to seeing this grow. Now, I know this is all about cups, but the company is Better for All. So are there plans in the distant future of coming out potentially with other types of similar products, maybe not in the cup form?
Yeah, well, so I would say initially we're going to focus on cups
For sure.
because you could go all the way down to, sample cups for trade shows
Oh,
and
yeah.
grocery stores and
Yeah.
dose cups, scoops for laundry. Like, there's so many different
So many things.
cup applications, right, that could use to be made out of something a little more
I never
friendly.
even thought about that. That's awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, and then we also are looking at different manufacturing methods. So right at the moment, we use a highly efficient manufacturing method, but that can't, the wall thickness can't go any thinner than it currently is.
Gotcha.
If you wanted to make a super lightweight cup that could go, say, on an airplane or something, you would want to use a different manufacturing method that we're just kind of the compound needs to be modified in certain ways so that it can take that kind of the pressures, right, that are applied to the product so that it doesn't just start to biodegrade in production. And then there's a pet project that I started working on seriously for a while, and then we put it to one side because it's just a completely different product, but it's got the same use case in its water bags. I don't know if you've heard of them, but actually, like, some huge percentage of the world's population consumes beverages out of plastic bags. And
I did not know that. Interesting.
Yeah, it's wild. I was actually on an airplane recently, and someone walked up with a Ziploc and sat next to me, and it had water in it. And I was like, oh my God, he's drinking water out of a Ziploc.
Did it have does it have like a spout, like a little?
In some cases, they stick a straw on the top, and in other cases, they bite the bottom of the corner off and drink it. It's considered sustainable to some degree because it's lighter weight, it's less plastic than a bottle. But there are these machines, they're called form, fill, and seal machines, and they take these huge, thick plastic rolls and they roll them down and they seal them off, and about 500 milliliters of water is dropped in, and they seal off the top. And they gets, like, especially in Africa, They get, dropped off on street corners and in small
Yeah.
markets, and people buy maybe 10 at a time. They bite off the
Wow.
corner, drink the water, and throw the bag. And the bags
Mm.
are filling the bays.
Oh,
They're
I can
just
imagine.
a huge problem on the beaches and in the bays. So we of course were like, oh, we should use, this was back when we were really focusing on film. And
Mm-hmm.
like, this would be the most amazing thing ever. But you do need a film that can like sustain 130 and upwards degree heat in, shipping containers
Yeah.
and on the ground, right, in
Yeah.
Africa. And that can be bounced around on a truck and can
Yeah.
be
It's got to be there.
frozen and then
Yeah.
defrosted. So I'm not there yet, but
Not there yet. Not
I
there
have a
yet. I
little,
like that.
yeah, I'm
Not
not
there
there
yet.
yet. But I have this like,
Yeah.
I have a little brain worm about it. So yeah.
Now, a lot of this time, it takes time, right, to develop these products, because it's almost like you're starting it from scratch for every single Evo product. And you would think like once you make one cup, other cups would be the same, but you're right. It's very different depending on how they're shipped, depending on how they're contained in another container, or what right now, for some reason on the top of my head, I'm thinking, in a protein, like a protein powder
Yeah.
container. There are the
Yeah.
little scoops and things like that. You mentioned scoops, and I would imagine like that gets to a certain temperature, and that that gets banged around a little bit, maybe a little bit more protected because of the powder, but still, you want to
Yep.
make sure. There's so many applications, but it takes time to develop, and this could
Yep.
be like, as you said, it could be 3-4 years where it takes time just to develop. You must have to have a lot of patience to be able to develop these things. Even just the sort of the use case you're using right now with the bags of water, you're probably like, oh, we could help so many people and so
Right.
many, like, with the oceans and the bays and things like that, we can really protect that, but you're still, you're not there. So how do you deal with that, the patience of innovation and the
Yeah.
iterations
So
of that?
I I'm a creative, just a born creative. So I don't have a problem with patience. I
Okay.
would say that the issue is funding. So,
Right. Yeah.
you can be
Yeah.
patient, but like it's, funding. First of all, you need a lot of funding to do development. You need a
Hmm.
lot of buy-in from, so we've had like really great support from Konica, and we have a manufacturer for the last year and a half that got us to commercial,
Hmm.
an American conglomerate called Westfall Technic. They also are helping us. Like, you need people who, one, they're committed to the same idea you are. They
Yeah.
want to see it happen. They believe in the concept,
Hmm.
because you go through so many. I mean, it's not like, they're so used to working with plastic. They've worked with plastic for 100 years. All the equipment is built for plastic. The process engineers have been doing, they use PFAS. You know what PFAS are, right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
spray Teflon on things to make them release from the molds. And I'm like, no way. I mean, I can go in and literally like examine everybody's process and then bum them out by telling them they can't use any of the tricks they've come up with.
Yeah.
Everything has to be changed, and then it needs to be controlled. And so you need your manufacturer to buy in, and then you need your customer to buy in. You need, and then you need, so that time takes money.
Yeah.
And it takes a while to get a product that's going to sell, at the volumes that would get you into the black, and you start seeing a little profit.
Hmm.
Investors want a 5 times return in a short amount of time.
Of
So
course.
you need investors that are also bought in. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we're currently in the process of looking for our next round of investment. So that
Okay.
would be why this is on my mind. But yeah, so patience
Yeah.
is one tiny part of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, Reagan, this is, I love this business. I love this idea, and I love, the saying, like, if you go to betterforall.shop, and if you want to buy it individually, for my audience members, I just love how it says right off the bat, make your event better for all. I was trying to see how it would tie in betterforall.co or betterforall.shop. And I'm like, now I see it. Now I see it. It's
Yeah.
make it better for all by just having these cups and using these cups. And it makes it so much better. It makes me feel better knowing that products like this are out there and they're growing. and I can't wait to see it at my next event that I attend, or if I'm not at an event, I'm gonna be like, you know what you should have? You should have these cups, because I mean they're much better. So I'm definitely going to be promoting it locally here and on the podcast. So, but yeah, this is wonderful. Really love the fact that you spent the time with us to explain the business. The innovation that goes into it. And I want to thank you for the dedication, the time that you and your family have put into making our world better for all. It's really great. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And we'd love to have you on again to see where you're going with how this is growing.
Oh, that's terrific. I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
You bet. No problem.
All right. Take care.
You too. Thank you, Reagan, for joining us here on the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. It's a great community to be a part of, and I'm glad you are now a part of it, Reagan, to be able to say, hey, you know what? We have this product that's good for the environment. You can use it. It's great to use. It's easy to use. It's a cup. Let's think about it. We need more products like this, where everyday items that we get to use, whether it be at a festival, a sports venue, concert venue, maybe out you're having a picnic and you don't want to, break any glasses or have all reusable, drinks or containers, and you just want to have these ones and they're fully compostable. Just makes it easy. You don't have to think about it. Makes it easy. They're well priced, and they compete with all the other non-sustainable items. And so why not have this? And I just think it's wonderful to be able to have this in circulation, available for people to use at, high quantities if they need it. Like, Reagan was talking about, I think it was like 140,000 cups were used. Unreal. That's available to us in such big venues that are now not going to cause a lot of garbage because of those cups. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this company evolves and other types of innovative ways of using cups and any type of containers that's you need to scoop or you need to drink liquids out of, or very different usages, powders or anything like that. It'll be interesting to see where this company goes. I don't think they're going to be a fly-by-night company. I think they're going to be here for a while, and I'm looking forward to seeing that and helping to promote their business and helping you get those items. So if you want to buy something from them, you can go, like a cup, you can go to betterforall.shop, betterforall.shop. Take a look at what's available, and I highly recommend that you buy a sleeve or two, or three or four for your next event. It's always great. It's always wonderful to be able to have something that is sustainable. I mean, let's be honest, that's why you're here. If you want to know how to protect the ocean, use these compostable cups from Better for All. That's it for today's episode. I really want to thank you for joining us. If you want to join the community, I'm creating an app. I'm in the midst of talking back and forth to the creators, and I've got some prints that I'm going to put out, like some mock-ups that I'm going to put out of what it's going to look like. But it's a community app. I want people to be all on the same device, like the same app, where you can interact with each other. We can have, AMAs, Ask Me Anything, or have, scientists and business leaders on that are making sustainable items, so you can ask questions to them. And it's a wonderful, provide resources of where you can get these great materials and great products and sustainable products. I want to just basically have it all there. It'll be free to join. There'll be other products in the later on where there might be services or anything else that I provide that might be a little, they'll be premium, but for the most part, it'll be free. All you have to do right now is just go and sign up for any kind of updates, and when it gets released, you'll have access to that app. It's speakupforblue.com/ocean app. That's speakupforblue.com/ocean app. I want to thank you for joining me on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.